We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Glory UGA podcast, brought to you by the awesome people at Alumni Hall. Make sure to check them out, guys, for the best selection of Georgia gear that you're going to find anywhere out there, hands down. And with another week of Georgia football's fall camp and also a second fall scrimmage in the books, I've got some more intel for you guys. So we'll dive deep into all of that here on today's show. But first, before we get there, make sure you guys remember, everything that we do here on this channel is designed for all you Georgia diehards. So if that's who you are and you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead, do yourself a solid, do me a solid, subscribe right now, hit those notifications, like the video, comment, all that stuff, guys. It really is a huge help as we continue our march towards 3,500 subscribers, which is our goal. Our goal was 3,000. We hit that goal. Now we're moving on to 3,500 by the time the season starts. So we got 2 more weeks. So any and all help there, guys, is certainly greatly appreciated. But all right. So Georgia just finished up what is technically its final week of fall camp, culminating with the team's second and final real scrimmage of the fall. Guys, from this point on, it's pretty much game prep now that school has started. And it's like when school starts, the team is no longer like all together there in a hotel around the facility like 24/7. They go back to their normal places of residence. They're going to school now, and now it's like a normal week of practice. So we've moved through fall camp. And yeah, on Saturday, we'll do like a walk-through special teams scrimmage of sorts, but it certainly won't be like the scrimmages that we've seen last week and this week as well. But camp is over. Camp is over. And like last week, I want to bring you guys what I've been hearing about the development over the final week of camp and, of course, the second fall scrimmage specifically. Now, before I do that, guys, really quickly here, I do feel compelled to say this. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. We all understand how to take this information. In the interest of full disclosure, it is certainly harder to get information coming out of the second scrimmage of the fall. Why? Because it's more closed off, and it's more closed off by design. There's no McGill Society people there. So the first scrimmage, it's a lot easier to get information if you know some people in the McGill Society, because that's one of the perks of being a McGill Society member is you get to come to a spring practice scrimmage and you get to come to a fall camp scrimmage, and there's other things as well. But that's certainly one of the perks. But McGill Society people were not a part of this second scrimmage. So that certainly eliminates a lot of sources, which means there's not as much information and it's harder to get information coming out of this scrimmage. Certainly information that I trust, because it's harder to corroborate it with multiple sources, right? So I just want to put that out there. But saying that, I did still manage to get some stuff for you guys that I do think is worth sharing. So that's what we're going to do here. Let's get to it. And once again, guys, I'm going to start with the wide receiver room, which I think has to be considered the breakout unit of the Georgia football team. I think going back to the spring, but certainly during the course of fall camp. Now, I told you guys back in June, I think I did the first position unit preview I did every single position. The first one I did, I believe, I remember correctly, was on the wide receivers. And I did that by design because I was really excited back in June about what this wide receiver unit could be. I loved the talent that we brought in. I thought we had a lot more depth. I loved the different body types we brought in, the way they complement each other. And I told you guys on that episode about 2.5 months ago or so now, that I thought that wide receiver unit had a chance to be the single best wide receiver room that the University of Georgia has ever seen. And some people mocked me for that. Some people laughed at me. Some people told me that I was just being a crazy, overzealous homer, because like, how could you possibly say that after what we saw from Georgia's wide receiver unit a year ago? And guys, I get it. I spent all of last year lambasting that wide receiver unit, simply saying that it just wasn't good enough. Like, those guys, they're doing the best, man. They're going out there and practicing hard, playing hard, but like, we just did not have the type of playmakers that we needed to have in order to make a deep run in the college football playoff. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I still think it was borderline miraculous that we were able to win the SEC a year ago, considering the context of all the injuries that we dealt with, the lack of playmakers at wide receiver, our quarterback kind of just going into a shell, and who knows exactly what happened there. But the wide receiver unit was a major issue last year. So I know if you're skeptical about the wide receiver unit coming into this year, going back like June when I was first talking about them, I get it. I understand where that comes from. But I felt pretty good about what we brought in. I saw these guys. I did get the benefit of seeing them up close and personal during the spring last year, at a couple of practices, at GA, all that. So I got to see maybe a little bit more, and that certainly got me excited. But with each and every passing day of camp, every time I get a little bit of information from people I trust, I feel more and more confident about this wide receiver room. If anything, I'm just my confidence is growing. I'm not losing any of that. Like sometimes that happens in fall camp. Spring practice, like it is what it is. In fall camp, some guys, they hit a wall and maybe they don't make the strides you were hoping they would over the course of summer. But that has not been the case with this Georgia wide receiver room. Noah Thomas, I did an episode a couple weeks ago, the beginning of fall camp, about how he was off to a hot start. He was, man. Like, this is the guy from like day one in fall camp, was really opening eyes, making waves early and often. He really hasn't slowed down. It wasn't like Noah Thomas just had a good week and then he slowed down. No, he's continued to make plays week after week, practice after practice, scrimmage after scrimmage. Zachariah Branch, as we talked about here last week on the show, he kind of stole the show last week during the first scrimmage. He was the star offensively of that first scrimmage. Did a bunch of big things offensively, also in the special teams area. Had a touchdown run, although I don't know how much stock to put in that since we don't really go fully live with special teams in those scrimmages. But he had a great first scrimmage. But this week, it was a new name, and not a name that we haven't talked about here before. We have, because he was a big-time recruit coming to high school, did some really nice things at times during the spring, but he was a true freshman, and your head spinning as a true freshman. Also wasn't the most polished receiver coming out of high school, but the talent was undeniable. The raw skill set, undeniable. And to be honest with you guys, coming into this week, I had not heard a ton of buzz around his name. It was his running mate, Talon Taylor, who I had heard much more buzz about the first couple of weeks of fall camp. It's certainly that first scrimmage as well, which we talked about last week. But this week, it was the other big-time fringe five-star freshman recruit, C.J. Wiley from Milton High School. I'm sure a lot of you guys watched Milton versus Buford last week. And Milton, still a really good football team. They don't have a dude on the outside like C.J. Wiley. Also, don't have a guy at tight end like Ethan Barbour, who, both those guys on the same team. How could you not win a state title, right? Now both those guys are on the Dogs. Both of them doing big things. But it was Wiley that had a huge scrimmage by all accounts. Everything that I've heard is this guy just flat out tore it up, went off on Saturday. Now, if you guys are old timers like me, you probably remember the Mark Richt days, and it was always fun. When we had we've always done the fall camp scrimmages, right? That's kind of just par for the course, whatever program, whatever coach is out there. But with Richt, one thing I always appreciated, I always loved, was that he would come in his post-scrimmage press conference, because he'd meet with the media after every one of those scrimmages, and he would have a sheet of paper, and he would read off stats for you. Aaron Murray went 11 for 13 for 217 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, right? Todd Gurley busted off an 80-yard touchdown. He would give you stats. Now, they were very, very unofficial, but he would give you stats, and that was you could take that and run with it. Obviously, Kirby does not do that. Kirby is a lot more secretive about things. He's more closed off. If he had his way, no one would ever see practice. No one in the McGill Society, no family members, no one in the media. If he had his way, it would just be coaches, players, trainers, and that's it. So we don't get those numbers, but one of my guys that I talked to said that Wiley went for at least 200. Yeah, 200, 2 bills, not 1 bill, 2 bills. And if that was just the only time I heard anyone say anything about Wiley, it's okay, it was 200. I'd be like, okay, you're probably exaggerating that a little bit here. But then I had another guy tell me that he went for almost 250. So he upped the ante. So where's the truth? Probably somewhere in the middle. But it sounds like he just, again, flat out went off, including multiple explosive plays, 40, 50, 60-yard gains out there. Now, I will put this disclaimer out there that Wiley was not, from what I have been told, and again, you guys, when you're relying on people that are out there, you're not seeing with your own 2 eyes, it's secondhand, third-hand information sometimes, so you have to take it with a grain of salt, and they see what they see. At a Georgia practice, it's really hard to see everything because we're going 100 miles an hour. Scrimmage is easier, right? Because you're not two-spotting as much like we do in actual practice, and there's not a million things going on. So, you just got to be aware of that. But what I was told is that he did not work with the number 1 offense. Okay, that's what I heard. Could that be wrong? I don't know, maybe, possibly. But people that I trust say he was not working with the number 1, so this was all done with the second and mainly the third team offense, okay? So there's that. But you also have to remember, okay, so he's doing this as a second, third team defense. All right, true. but you're also working with a second and third team quarterback, a second and third team offensive line, okay? So you got to think about it from that standpoint as well. But whatever the context, guys, going for allegedly 200 plus in a scrimmage for a true freshman, how can that not be encouraging? I'm not telling you to go run to the window right now and put a future bet on Noah or on CJ to be an All-American or a Heisman Trophy guy. No, he's a freshman, right? This is one isolated setting. But still, you don't hear numbers like that often, whether it's second team, third team, freshman, senior. You just don't hear that, guys. So he had a bananas big day. And when you look at Noah Wiley, as I said, this is a guy that even back in high school, if you watch the tape, you follow recruiting closely like I do, like I know a lot of you do, has always been freakishly athletic. A little thin, but tall, long, athletic, a leaper, 50-50 ball kind of guy, and he gets the ball in space. Yeah, he's a bit more of a longer strider, but once he gets going, this guy has legit speed as well. So freakish athleticism. He's always had that, but he was more raw coming out of high school than a guy like Talon Taylor was, which is why I think Talon Taylor got out to maybe a little faster start in the spring and also here to start fall camp. But the skill set is there. And it sounds like if Saturday was any indication that he's starting to become more and more comfortable in this offense, maybe it was just a case of his raw talent just rising to the surface, just making some crazy plays. Maybe that's part of it. But you don't go for 200 plus yards in a scrimmage by accident, whether it's second, third team. That doesn't happen by accident. So I think that's more cause to believe in this Georgia wide receiver room. And guys, look, we're not counting on Wiley to be the first or second or third or even fourth option. He might be a fifth or sixth option. If your fifth or sixth option is doing things like that, you're in pretty good shape in that wide receiver room. So that's why it's another reason why I've been so excited about this wide receiver unit. Noah Thomas, I mentioned him going back to the beginning of fall camp. I think the first recap we did of fall camp was, hey, Noah Thomas is doing huge things out there. And that continues to be the case. Had another highlight reel catch. I told you he had two 50-50 ball catches. One was just an insane highlight reel catch, which seems to be a common theme with Noah Thomas and that 6'6" frame he has and the athleticism that he brings along with that. Now, Colby Young, a guy that I have predicted all along, all offseason, to be Georgia's leading receiver this season. He didn't get as many reps in this scrimmage, but I would not read too much into that. In fact, if I read anything into it, I see that as a good sign. I see that as, we trust Colby Young. We know what we have in Colby Young. He's been in the system for now two springs, 2 falls, and this guy is ready to go. And I read that as he might actually end up being that number 1 receiver for Georgia, which is kind of what I predicted. I think we have a number of options. It could be Zachariah Branch, who had a huge scrimmage last scrimmage. It could be Noah Thomas, who's been doing big things. It certainly could, but Colby Young, while he didn't get as many reps, I don't see that as a negative. I see that as, hey, we know what this guy can do, and we're going to let some other guys get reps out there to see if they can show us a little bit of something in this scrimmage setting. Now, London Humphrey, another guy that I'm high on, that I think is a really, really strong depth piece for this Georgia offense at receiver. He was in a black jersey, which means no contact, so that's not ideal, but from what I was told, he was out there running around doing a lot of things, just wasn't going through contact. So it seems like it's a minor deal. I don't think it's anything that's going to be lingering. So hopefully with 2 weeks to go for the season, he'll be good to go when we get to that first game against Marshall. But any of you out there, guys, who had any lingering concerns about Georgia's wide receiver room, I hope now that you should rest a little easier. I know we're all tightly wound because the season's almost here. We're just desperate to see what it looks like. And of course, we want Georgia to win the national title again this year, and the receiver room taking a big step is a big part of that. So we're cautiously optimistic and very anxious about that. I totally get that. But all signs are pointing to this wide receiver room being just dramatically improved from what it was a year ago. One more note here, guys. I skipped through this. Dylan Bell. So Dylan Bell, I'm very intrigued to see what we do with him. Last year, we know we had to play him out of position at the X due to off-the-field issues with Rara Thomas and Colby Young, an injury to Colby Young to start the season as well. And Dylan's not really an X. He can function there fine, which he did last year, but he wasn't a dynamic X. That's not really what he's best at. He's more of a Z. If anything, he can play in the slot as well. But what makes Dylan unique is the versatility, right? This guy's played running back for Georgia. So I'm very curious to see exactly what role we use him in this season. I've seen him at practice during the spring, doing a lot of working at running back. We're getting more involved in like the jet sweep, fly sweep game, end around game. And speaking of that, I was told, I don't know if it was the first drive, but in one of the early drives, he did bust like a big 50-plus yard explosive play on one of those like jet sweep end arounds that set up a touchdown later in that drive that he hauled in from Gunnar Stockton. So Dylan Bell also doing good things. I think it's just going to help us that he's not going to be forced into a role that he's not really fully built for. So I think that's also a reason to be excited about this Georgia wide receiver room in 2025. But all right, if the wide receivers are indeed balling out like they are, and every indication, guys, is that is very much the case, well, that also means your quarterback plays got to be pretty good as well, right? The receivers can't do that alone. They can't do that in isolation. And that was apparently the case again on Saturday. I've been telling you guys all fall, certainly going back this spring as well, that Gunnar Stockton is the guy. And I know not everyone's excited about that. Some people are, some people aren't. It is one of those things. If you're a Georgia quarterback, there's people for you, there's people against you. Go back to Stetson Bennett and even before that, guys. Aaron Murray had his detractors. I remember the people said Aaron couldn't win the big one, which I guess technically he didn't win an SEC title, but Aaron was incredible for us. So it's just part of the course of playing the quarterback position. But I'm telling you guys, what I have seen from him and what I continue to hear is that Gunnar's in complete control. He is clearly 100% the guy. And he was a guy, he apparently led multiple scoring drives, which you love to hear. I know that makes you think, oh, what's the defense doing? But that's the catch-22 of fall camp and spring practice scrimmages. If one side of the ball excels, the other side, they must be terrible, right? And it kind of goes back and forth. But apparently he led multiple scoring drives. He was the one that did throw that touchdown pass to Bell early on the scrimmage. And on that play in particular, it was in the red zone, and he apparently had to escape the pocket, create outside the pocket, and hit Bell on the move, which is not something we really had last year. So I know a lot of people out there, certainly outside the Georgia fan base, are convinced that Gunnar cannot possibly match what Carson Beck gave us. And I do think there are some things that Carson did better than Gunnar, and he certainly has more experience than Gunnar, so there's that. But there are a lot of things that Gunnar does very well that Carson just simply could not do. That's creating outside the pocket, being a factor in the quarterback run game, throwing the ball vertically down the field with accuracy. And a lot of that was on display again during the second scrimmage, like it kind of has been all fall long. But behind Gunnar, Ryan Puglisi continues to develop, and that's great news, guys. And he's getting real reps with the number one offense. Now, I don't want you to overreact to that either, okay? Your backup quarterback always gets real reps with the number one offense at this point in your preparation in fall camp. They have to, right? Because God forbid, knock on wood, if something happens to your starting quarterback like we saw in the SEC title game last year, you got to have somebody that's equipped to come in there and run the offense and has at least some working familiarity with the number one unit, with those players, with that center, with the wide receivers, with the backs, right? So you don't want your backup quarterback, even though he's like the number two guy, you don't want him always working with the number twos at this point. Now, once you get to the season, the number one quarterback gets the vast majority of the reps with the ones during the week. The backup will get a couple spot snaps here and there, but not a ton. But when you're still in fall camp, those snaps that the backup gets with the number one offense are certainly at a higher percentage than they otherwise would be. So, again, don't read too much into that. But Puglisi, guys, is really starting to come on. Again, Gunnar is the guy. I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to tell you that, hey, man, Puglisi's making a run. He's pushing Gunnar. That's not really happening right now. But I'm still excited about what Puglisi is doing because, again, you have to have a viable backup option if you want to be a real national title contender. We saw it last year, guys, in the SEC title game. Our starter goes down right before halftime. Throwing it against a team that makes the semifinals of the college football playoff. You have to have a guy that's able to come in right away and pick up the slack and go lead you to some scoring drives. And that's exactly what Gunnar Stockton did. And the way that Gunnar plays, kind of with reckless abandon, you really need to have a guy behind him that you feel comfortable in that can help you. I think that's one of the reasons, like, we didn't go hard after guys necessarily at the quarterback position in the portal, but we certainly kicked the rocks around a couple of guys because, number one, you want to push Gunnar because Kirby believes in competition. Iron sharpens iron. But you also want to have that insurance option, right? But now we weren't going to go out and pay a bunch of money for one of those guys because, like, we believe in Gunnar, and also is a hard sell because some of the big-time quarterbacks out there, Fernando Mendoza, a guy that visited, just, for example, he's now in Indiana. when you look at our situation on the outside looking in, it's like, well, Gunner came in, led you to an SEC title, played well against Notre Dame. He's been in the system for a long time. He's certainly going to have a head start on me. So it's a hard sell as well. But bottom line is you have to have a guy that can go in there and lead touchdown drives and lead scoring drives and do what you need to do in order to win games and to the point that your star can hopefully get back at some point. And Pug is kind of growing into that. Physically speaking, and this is what I said going back to the spring, like pre-spring, kind of previewing spring practice back in, I guess, February, March, and I'll stand by it. Puglisi has better physical tools than Gunner Stockton does. He's a little bigger, he's a little more athletic, he's got a little bit of a better arm. Not that Gunner's not athletic, not that Gunner doesn't have a good arm. He does in all those categories. Puglisi's just maybe a slight notch above in those areas. Now, Gunner has the experience in our system. He's far more comfortable. You have to remember, Puglisi was hurt all last spring and pretty much all of fall camp last year. It wasn't until like about midway through the season last year that he was like fully cleared to practice. So he missed a lot of developmental time. In the spring, you saw that. I mean, it was his first real spring of going through practice with us. And he was up and down. He showed flashes of brilliance because he's got that skill set, but also more than a few like, what are you doing kind of moments. And he still has those from time to time, but he's apparently cut down on those dramatically and is more in control of what we're doing out there offensively, setting up protections, checks, pre-snap, post-snap, diagnosing coverages, all those things. And I think that's huge, man. That's huge for this Georgia team that Pug is coming along the way that he is. Hopefully we don't have to find out this season. Hopefully, if all things go according to plan. But you never know, man. Like, we've been decimated by injuries the past 2 years. So it's great that the backup quarterback is coming along like that. But I'd also be remiss, guys, if I talked about the quarterback position and failed to mention true freshman Ryan Montgomery. I did mention him briefly last week. If you guys remember, he tore his ACL at the beginning of his senior season. I liked him coming out of high school, seeing his junior tape. So he missed basically all of his senior season, missed all of spring camp, but he has been cleared. He's been going through all the fall practices. And look, like Puglisi, he's not going to push Gunner this year. Like, that's not in the cards, okay? That's not in the cards. Hope to God Montgomery does not have to play. Like, you don't want to go to your number 3 quarterback. But saying that, looking towards the future in the post-Gunner era, which will happen eventually, Montgomery is looking more and more like a guy that could be a legitimate contender to be that next starting quarterback post-Gunner Stockton. I love Pug. We love Jared Curtis. But we can't write off Montgomery because all this guy continues to do is impress. And I know it's the second, it's the third team that he's working with. He's not getting any reps with the number 1 offense. But for a guy that missed all of his senior season and didn't take any reps during the spring, for him to be where he is right now in his development and doing the things that he's doing, impressing the way that he's impressing consistently, guys, it's been a couple of weeks now, that is extremely encouraging for the future and what Ryan Montgomery could be. So you love to hear that, guys. You know, with C.J. Wiley going crazy, well, who's the quarterback throwing in the football? Yeah, by and large, it was Ryan Montgomery doing that. So they kind of go hand in hand there. So if you put all that together, you put together the receivers continuing to do big things, the quarterback play continuing to be very, very encouraging. I am extremely confident in the Georgia pass game, and by extension, the Georgia offense at large, which I know I did an episode last week telling you guys why I think the Georgia offense will be improved this year, and the wide receiver room and the quarterback play is a big part of that equation. But, all right, let's move on along a little bit here on the offense. Let's go to the running back position. I don't have a ton here, but Bo Walker, true freshman, continues to do what Bo Walker does and just makes plays. Like, from week 1, day 1 of spring practice, like the first padded practice, I was hearing buzz about this guy back in the spring. And that has not let up for a single second. I told you guys coming into the fall that one of the positions that I was looking at is like maybe a possible position battle. It wasn't the number 1 running back spot. That's Nate Frazier. He's going to be the guy. But the backup spot, like that number 2, the Robin to Nate Frazier's Batman, I thought that was kind of up for grabs. Like, yeah, you go get Josh McCray, Illinois' leading rusher from a year ago, but he wasn't here for the spring. Rod Robinson's coming back, but he's coming off some serious injuries. You don't know what version of him you're going to get. Chauncey Bowens has done some good things at times, but still hasn't played a ton, so you don't know there. Dwight Phillips is an electric athlete, and he's gained some weight, but is he really an every down type back? We know Cash Jones is awesome. He fits a certain role on third downs. And you got Bo Walker, who had a monster spring as a true freshman. So I thought that number 2 back spot was kind of open. I handicapped it as like I thought Josh McCray would be that guy ultimately, and maybe he will be. But if you remember, Josh McCray, we talked about this last week, missed the first portion of fall camp with an illness. It might not end up being the biggest deal, but for a guy that wasn't here in the spring, was a spring portal window guy, and he's practicing with Georgia for the first time, like, you need to be out there, right? Get up to speed and get those reps. That's how you grow. That's how you develop. That's how you get familiar with our offense. And he missed some of that time. Now he's back. He's back, and that's good. And I still think he's going to factor into our run game this year. I certainly do. But at this point, guys, what I continue to hear about Bo, he might end up being a number 2 guy to open the season. Maybe. I can't say that definitively right now, but he's in the conversation. And regardless, second or third to open the season, he's going to get carries, like real carries in real minutes, because all this guy does is make plays. He just continues to generate buzz, practice after practice, week after week, man. It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, Nate Frazier was not much of a factor in the first scrimmage last weekend, but that was almost by design. He didn't get a lot of carries. It's kind of like, you go back and you look at like Colby Young, a receiver. Like, yeah, okay, we know what we have in Colby. Like, we want to see what we have in these other guys. And it was kind of the same thing with Nate Frazier with that first scrimmage. Now, the second one, I was told he did get more carries and had a bigger day. Did bite off a couple of chunk plays, which is great because that's what we need Nate to do. Like, Nate has that explosive ability. We saw it week 1 against Clemson a year ago, and we just need to see that more consistently from Nate. So that was good to hear. Dwight Phillips, guy I mentioned a few minutes ago. Again, so he's a true electric athlete at that position. Like, he's one of the fastest guys on the entire football team. But we kind of used him in a gadget role last year. It wasn't like hey, we're going to line you up on first and second down, standard downs, and have you run between the tackles. But he's got a little bigger. He's not the biggest guy out there. Peanut, by the way, is his nickname. That's what he goes by. But Peanut apparently had a 20-ish yard touchdown run, which is nice to see, man, because that guy, like, when you have playmakers like that that are that dynamic from an athleticism standpoint, you got to find ways to get them touches. Maybe not 10, 15 touches a game, but get him a couple touches a game because it just takes one play. It just takes one time for him to bust a game-changing type play. And Dwight Phillips, I think, will play for Georgia at times this year. So we continue to look like we are in really good shape at running back, certainly in better shape than we were a year ago, considering the injuries and the inexperience we had at that position last year. Now, the offensive line, the starting unit was the exact same as last week, at least what I was told, which means that, yes, true freshman Juan Gaston was again the starter at right guard. I told you guys that last week, that he opened the first scrimmage of the fall as a starter at right guard, was rotating, but opened as the starter, and he did so again in the second scrimmage yesterday. So, look, guys, I know that we're still a couple of weeks away from the first game, so there's still some time for these things to change, time for guys to make a move, sure, yes. But if you look at where we are right now, this guy, Juan Gaston, as a true freshman, has now started not one, but 2 fall scrimmages. And yes, guys, we've only had 2 fall scrimmages. So he has started both of them. At this point, when you look at what's in front of us, I would be surprised if Gaston was not the starter for Georgia at right guard to open the season. I would be surprised. Again, it's not to say that Michael Uini or Daniel Calhoun can't make a move these last 2 weeks, but you got to look at the evidence we have in front of us. And if he has started both scrimmages of the fall, that should be pretty strong indication of what we think about him and where he is situated right now on the depth chart a couple of weeks ahead of the start of the 2025 season. Now, Michael Uini, who's a guy that worked a lot with the number 1 offense at right guard during the spring, certainly when Daniel Calhoun went down with an injury in the back half of the spring, he continues to get reps with the number 1 offense. But this week, and during the scrimmage, it was primarily at left guard. Now, again, Micah Morris is a guy kind of like Nate Frazier and Colby Young. Of the offensive lineman we have, he's one of the guys that we feel most comfortable with because he's played more than those guys. This is going to year 3 where he's going to play a big role for us. And he was never a full-time starter the last 2 years, but he was a guy that rotated in regularly. He was like a co-starter. We basically had 3 guys at guard that we were rotating between Morris, Dylan Fairchild, and Tate Ratledge, right? And it's primarily Fairchild and Morris rotating there. But he's got a couple of starts in his career, has to play a lot for Georgia. So he didn't practice as much during the scrimmage, and so that allowed Uini to get more reps at left guard. So the way I'm looking at this right now, based on what we've seen, what I've heard through the first 2 scrimmages of the fall, it seems like it's shaping up to be another 3-man rotation at guard with Gaston, Morris, and Uini. Now, could Calhoun still factor in there? Yes, I'm not giving up on Daniel Calhoun. Let's not forget, he was the guy that was the starter to open the spring, got hurt, and that certainly set him back. Some of the other guys moved ahead of him a little bit, but he's still in that conversation. And look, we've had injuries on the offensive line. Hopefully everyone stays healthy this year, but that's been a problem for us, certainly last year. So I'm not saying like wave the white flag on Daniel Calhoun. No. But right now, it looks like the top three at guard are Uini and Morris at left guard, with Morris being the starter, and Gaston over at right guard. So I don't know. That's interesting, but it seems to be where we are right now at guard. Now, as a whole, I was told the offensive line did a much better job in the second scrimmage than they did in the first one in terms of getting movement, opening up holes for the run game, because basically what I was told is like we just couldn't get much of anything going in the run game for the most part. And Chauncey Bowens had a couple of big runs, or had the biggest runs of the first scrimmage, but by and large, we just could not get much going on the ground that first scrimmage, and we had a much better day moving the football on the ground this time around on Saturday. So, hey, that's something, right? I know. It's the catch-22. Offensive line performs well. What about the defensive line? Well, the defensive line had their day in that first scrimmage. I think we were fine on both sides of the football there. Now, defensively, we were not as dominant as we were a week ago. The defense last week apparently was just on fire. Awesome. The offense had a really tough go of things last week. This week, the defense still had some good moments, but the offense kind of struck back and maybe got a little bit of the better of the defense here in this second scrimmage. But again, I wouldn't read too much into that. Things go back and forth in spring practice and fall camp. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. But I do have a couple of items here worth noting on defense that I do want to share with you. Starting in the secondary, Adrian Maddox got the start at safety opposite KJ Bolden. Now, I told you guys last week during the first scrimmage that Maddox was splitting reps with Ja'Cory Thomas. He's been in the system now for 4 years. He was splitting reps with Thomas with the number one defense opposite KJ Bolden back there at safety. Now, Thomas spent most of the past week of fall camp banged up. It doesn't seem like it's a major injury from what I can gather, but a minor ailment of sorts that's kind of kept him out at times. And what has that done? Well, it's opened the door for Maddox to get more reps and give him more of an opportunity to make his case to the coaches. And make his case he apparently has. Now, it's still certainly a battle there, but Maddox is making his move, and he did get the start over Thomas. And Thomas played. Thomas rotated in with the ones, okay? So Thomas wasn't like completely out of the conversation. They're still rotating there, but in this scrimmage, it was Maddox, not Thomas starting, which is kind of the roles were reversed a little bit from that first scrimmage. So I think that's one of the bigger position battles of camp, and I think it's one of those things that very well could go into the season. But right now, Maddox, which, by the way, if you remember, is the UAB transfer, who is just a freaking headhunter, man. Like, he will rip your head off. Really good athlete as well. Worked a lot at Star during the spring, but we cross-trained some at safety as well, but it's been more of a full-time safety during the fall, and is certainly making his move there. Now, also of note in the secondary, and probably, I would say, the biggest position battle, probably in the entire team during the course of fall camp, has been Ellis Robinson and Daniel Harris and DeMello Jones at cornerback. Daniel Harris got the start with the number one defense in that first scrimmage last week. Ellis Robinson worked in with the number ones, also worked with the number twos as well. This week, just like at safety, the roles were reversed. Ellis Robinson, the fourth, former number 2 player overall in the entire country, only behind Ohio State's Jeremiah Smith in that 2024 recruiting class, got the start at cornerback in this second fall scrimmage for the Dogs. Now, Daniel Harris mixed in with the number one offense, just like Robinson did last week, but Harris also worked quite a bit with the number 2 defense as well. And like safety, this is very much, guys, a battle that will likely go into the season, especially when you have that kind of soft landing the first 2 weeks against Marshall and Austin Peay. You kind of have the benefit of rolling guys in and out some of those positions and allowing those position battles to play themselves out in real game settings, because you're not opening up against a Clemson-type caliber team. So that battle, I do imagine, will continue to go on into the early parts of the season before somebody like fully just takes that position by the horns. But hey, Ellis is making his move. I know a lot of people have been eager for that to happen, and right now, it looks like he is making a strong push to be the starter at corner to open the season. All right, let's move to the front six here. I was told that linebacker, redshirt freshman Justin Williams had a big day. And that should not be a surprise, you guys. He's Ellis was the number 2 player in the country in last year's class, Well, Williams was a top 10 player nationally, number one inside linebacker in the country. Was a little thin last year and just, we were stacked inside linebacker, so he just couldn't quite find a role on the team last year. But that was no indication that this guy didn't have the talent to play. He absolutely does. He just took a year. Just needed a year to get bigger, stronger, and get more up to speed with the system. And he has done all of those things. He had a huge spring. Along with Chris Cole, had a huge spring, and he has carried that momentum over into the fall. I was told that he was, quote, all over the field. He was pressuring the quarterback at times. We're going to use him as a pass rusher. Like, replacing Jalen Walker this year is going to be a by committee type thing. Well, Williams is going to be part of that committee with his explosive pass rushing ability off the edge. He also returned a fumble for a touchdown. And, guys, I'm convinced. The dude is absolutely going to be a factor for Georgia. All signs are pointing in that direction. At the jack linebacker position, this one's got me confused a little bit here, guys. Gabe Harris, I've talked about him all offseason. Is he going to be a jack linebacker? Is he going to be more of a 5-tech? Initially, I thought jack, and then we go out and we get Ella Madozi. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe we see him more as a 5-tech guy. And you look at his weight, he's at 270 plus, so that's more of a 5-tech than it is a jack body, but he's still an athlete. So could he be a versatile type guy like Michael Williams and play both position situations, which I think is probably what's going to happen. But I was told that this week Gabe Harris got a lot of work at the jack linebacker position in the scrimmage with the number one offense. So does that mean he's going to play more jack? I don't know. I've heard at times he's gotten work with the 5s as well. So I don't know, man. I do think that the answer is a little bit of both. We'll see exactly what that looks like and how the reps are split up at the different positions. But he did get a lot of work with the jack linebackers during this second scrimmage. So yeah, I continue to be confused about what exactly his role will look like. We're going to find out. We got 2 weeks left, guys. We're about to find out here real quick. But I'm probably burying the lead here and talking about the jack linebacker position because there's another name that has begun to emerge at that spot. And no, it's not Ella Madozi. I continue to hear good things about Madozi. Like everything you want to hear in terms of like his athleticism, his explosiveness, his strength at the point of attack. You hear all those good things, but it's kind of like Josh McCray at running back, guys. Like he wasn't here for the spring. He's still learning our defense, and it's complicated. Like what we do defensively is complicated. It's less complicated at jack than it is for like an off-ball linebacker, but there's still a lot of moving parts to our defense, and it just takes time. But physically, the tools are there. He's going to factor in. He's going to be a player for us. But the other name that has really begun to emerge over the past week or so of fall camp has been redshirt freshman Chris Jones. Now, I started to hear a little bit of buzz about him very, very late last week. So that's why I didn't really mention him much in the recap of the first week and a half of fall camp, that first scrimmage, because I just had begun to hear a little bit very, very late on. I didn't hear much about him during about the first scrimmage last week. So I didn't mention him. I want to give it another week to see, like, okay, is this real or is this like one good practice kind of thing? Well, apparently it's real because not only did Chris Jones get real reps with the number one defense at jack, the dude opened as the starter with the number one defense at that jack linebacker position. Not Gabe Harris, not Elo Madozi, not Quintavious Johnson, who was that guy in the spring when we had just a general lack of bodies at that spot. It was Chris Jones. That's surprising to me to a degree because, number one, let's go back to his high school years and what we recruited this guy as. Coming out of Virginia, we recruited him as an inside linebacker. He was an off-the-ball guy. That's what we were recruiting him as. But when you're in the same class as James Williams and Chris Cole, you still have C.J. Allen, you have Raylan Wilson on the team, and Zayden Walker's on the team now as a true freshman, who, by the way, also had I heard some really good things about this week as well. How are you going to fit in? Like, are you going to get playing time? Not now. Not that spot. Well, why don't we try you at a different spot where we don't have many bodies and we lost our top 7 pass rushers from a year ago, right? Why don't we try you at the jack spot? There's much more of an open path to playing time there. And he's a guy that is a little bit bigger, like 230, 235, bigger than Cole, bigger than James Williams, so more able to hold up, physically setting the edge against the run on standard downs. He's also got some good length, and he has some explosiveness, has some pass rushing ability, did some of that at the high school level. So during the spring, we made that move. It made sense, right? We're stacked at inside linebacker. There's not really much of a role for him. There's not many snaps from an inside linebacker this year, but maybe there is a jack. because who do we have? At least during the spring, we had Quintavious Johnson and a couple of freshmen, right? So yeah, by necessity, we essentially moved him to jack linebacker. And I was curious, like, is this like just, hey, like we needed some bodies there to be able to do practice during the spring? Or is this really a long-term move that we, as our coaching staff and Chris himself, that they're committed to long-term down the road? And that seems to be the case, guys. And I will go back to G-Day. He was with the number one defense at G-Day. Now, not the starter. That was Quintavious Johnson. But he rotated in. Now, at the time, I didn't quite know what to make of that. And what I ultimately settled on was like, well, it's just a necessity thing. Like, we just don't have a lot of bodies there. The other guys that are playing jack or freshmen, and like they're just really still learning things and haven't been with the system a lot. So I didn't put too much stock into that. But maybe I should have. Because right now, guys, it's not just buzz, man. Like, this guy is doing real things at practice. And again, not just getting reps with the number one defense, starting with the number one defense at jack linebacker. So apparently that buzz was real. So love to hear that, man. But because we need guys. Like, we need guys who step up at that position. I love Mendoza. I think he's going to be a big-time player for us. Still learning what to do, but I'm confident that will happen. It's, again, nice that we have a softer landing the first 2 weeks to allow that process to happen before we go to Tennessee week 3. Quintavious Johnson's done some good things. I like some of the freshmen that we had there. But Chris Jones, him being able to give us some real snaps there and like be an impact-type guy for us, that's huge. That's huge for this Georgia defense. And then finally, up front, not much here, guys. What I was told was the offensive line certainly had the better of the defensive line, it seems like, in this second scrimmage. But the freshmen up front continue to impress, had another big showing. Elijah Griffin on the interior. Guys, he's going to play. Is he going to start? No, probably not. Almost certainly not. But he's going to play, and I do believe those snaps are going to continue to increase as the year progresses. And at that 5-tech spot, there's that guy again. JJ, let me get this right. JJ Hanna, once again, guys, had another big scrimmage, and once again is in that blue Guardian cap, which, if you remember what I talked about last week, that's to signify fire, passion, energy. And he's a true freshman. A true freshman who is still very new to football, coming over from Germany late in his high school career. When we recruited this guy, I was like, okay, I haven't heard much about him, but let's turn on the tape. You see the tape, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy's got insane levels of raw talent. Still was a work in progress in terms of learning what to do. But man, if this guy has developed to the point where continues to get real reps with the number one defense at that 5-tech defensive end, that is huge for Georgia, because that does free up Gabe Harris to play more at that jack linebacker spot where we might need him at times, situation, maybe on standard downs as well. And so if you can match Joseph Jonah-Ajanye, who continues to do really good things as well at practice, and Hanna as a true freshman, I know it's young and there's not a lot of experience over there at that spot, but those are two highly talented young players that are going to be big-time players for Georgia for years to come at that position. I mean, when you look at Hanna, one scrimmage, when you hear about him making big plays and working with the number one defense, okay, one scrimmage makes you curious. Like, whoa, okay, is this real? Like, should I be putting a lot of stock into this? But when you hear for 2 scrimmages in a row and you only have 2 real scrimmages in the fall, that means you might just have a dude at that spot, true freshman or not. So that's kind of what it's shaping up to be like with JJ Hanna there. So I cannot wait to see him out there on the field in a couple of weeks. But all right, guys, that's what I got for today here coming out of that final week of real fall camp and that final real scrimmage of the fall. So hope you guys enjoy this episode. Again, if you're a diehard Georgia fan and you're not subscribed, this is the kind of content that you can expect on this channel week in and week out. So go ahead, subscribe right now, hit those notifications, hit that like button, comment, let me know what you guys think. Are there names that I didn't mention here that you're curious about? I tried to go over everything that I heard, but if there's somebody that you're curious about, I will try to reach out and put some feelers out there and see if I can get some more information for you guys as well. But thank you guys so much for being here. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.